All right, next let's talk about Apache Phoenix. Conceptually, it's similar to Drill in that it offers a SQL interface on top of a non-relational database. The main difference is that it only works with HBase and nothing else. So if you are just using HBase, it's worth looking at. What is Phoenix? Well, like I said, it's a SQL driver for HBase. So if you want to talk to your underlying HBase NoSQL database that sits on top of HDFS, but you want a SQL interface to it for whatever reason, Phoenix might be for you. Cool thing about it is that it supports transactions, so you can actually clump together different SQL queries together and commit them all together at once. So that way you can actually have a more complex transaction that gets executed what we call atomically, meaning that if some other client is trying to get a response back on what you're trying to change, it won't get some intermediate result as a part of that. So that's an important thing to some people. Phoenix is also very fast and low latency, so it can be appropriate for OLTP applications, online transaction processing, in addition to analytic queries. So that means if you have a wide-scale, big, web application that needs to execute very large transaction rates and get their answers back very quickly, Phoenix can actually meet those requirements, assuming your queries are simple enough. Obviously, if you're going to be doing a bunch of huge, crazy joins, you can't get blood from a stone. I mean, HBase is still fundamentally a non-relational database, so as long as you're careful to do your queries on things that are actually indexed, Phoenix can be quite fast. In fact, maybe even faster than using the native HBase connectors in some cases. Its history, it was originally developed by Salesforce.com, and then they chose to open source it, and it's currently an Apache project. Way it works, it exposes a JDBC connector for HBase. JDBC is just a driver for Java applications that is a standard for any SQL interface. So the nice thing about that is that if you have an application or a client that can already talk to a JDBC interface, such as many existing applications or things like Tableau and whatnot, you can just use Phoenix and potentially connect it straight to HBase without a whole lot of work. Now, again, remember, you have to keep in mind that this is still a non-relational database. So just because you can kind of act like it isn't doesn't mean you should. Okay, this is only for ease of use, really. Some cool things about Phoenix, it supports secondary indices on your HBase database, and it supports user-defined functions, so you can do some complex stuff potentially, and it has integration jar files that let you plug Phoenix into MapReduce, Spark, Hive, Pig, and Flume. Flume being something we haven't talked about quite yet, but it's a streaming data technology that's very popular. Why do they call it Apache Phoenix? Well, I don't really know, but it's kind of fun. If you go to their website at phoenix.apache.org and you go to their frequently asked questions, there's a question there that says, why is it called Phoenix? Did some previous project crash and burn and Phoenix took its place? And they kind of avoid the question and say, well, we don't have time to talk about that right now, maybe later. So I think there's a funny story there somewhere. If anyone knows what it is, let us know. I'm curious. Why would you use Phoenix? Well, like I said, it is highly optimized. I mean, it is very, very much focused on the case of taking more complex queries and making them execute on HBase in as efficient a way as possible. So if you are expressing what you want through SQL, and sometimes it's easier to express what you want through SQL than through lower level APIs, Phoenix might figure out a faster way of doing it than you might have thought of on your own. So sometimes you can actually get an increase in performance even though it's an additional layer on top of HBase. Why would you use Phoenix instead of Drill, which can also talk to HBase and gives you a real SQL interface? Well, I don't really have a good answer, but you should always choose the right tool for the job, right? I mean, if you know that you're only going to be dealing with HBase data and you need a SQL interface for HBase and nothing else, why not choose the tool that focuses exclusively on HBase? Odds are the developers that are maintaining Phoenix are paying a lot more attention to HBase optimization than the folks at Drill, who have to support HBase as just one of many different databases that it interfaces with. That said, I'm still a big fan of Drill. Why would you use Phoenix and not HBase's native clients? Well, the main reason is that in a lot of cases, you have people that are just used to SQL, and if you want to do analytic queries, having a SQL layer on top of your HBase data can make it easier to find answers to the questions that your business cares about, right? So that's reason alone to have it installed in some cases. But you might also have existing applications that are currently coding against a SQL interface through JDBC, and if so, using Phoenix can provide better compatibility with those applications. It's probably not going to just work out of the box because Phoenix doesn't support all of SQL, as we'll soon find out, but it'll be pretty darn close. And like I said before, Phoenix can do a lot of optimization work that you might not be able to do on your own, so sometimes it can do some pretty clever stuff to optimize what look like time-consuming queries. But again, remember, under the hood, HBase is still a non-relational database. It is a distributed database that is distributed based on some primary key that you choose. And if you have a complex query that you need to execute, you should probably ask yourself, should I create a new HBase table that just answers the question that I want more directly? Because that's always going to be the fastest way of getting your data back to an application. If you have a very simple table where the key is whatever you are querying on and the value is exactly what your application needs, that's always going to be the fastest thing to do. So don't use Phoenix as a crutch. How's Phoenix work? Well, it's actually not that complicated. I mean, what you're seeing here is mostly the HBase architecture, really, where you have a HBase client, which might be some application of yours, or maybe the JDBC driver, the database driver for Phoenix. And that talks to various HBase region servers, which in turn sit on top of your HDFS cluster to actually store and retrieve its data. And, ideally, your HBase region servers are aligned with the HDFS servers to minimize network traffic. Now, where Phoenix comes in is it has a Phoenix client that sits on top of the HBase API on your client side or within the database driver. And on the server side, there is a Phoenix coprocessor that installs itself into HBase to support what Phoenix wants to do. So it puts its tendrils into both the client and the server side for HBase and just kind of slaps itself on the side there. And both use Zookeeper to keep track of what region servers are actually available. Okay, so nothing too crazy there, really. Using Phoenix, the reason I love this lecture is because it gives me an excuse to use all sorts of publicly available cool Phoenix artwork, and there's one. There are many ways to use Phoenix. One is through the command line interface that comes with the Phoenix installation itself, and we'll play around with that in a minute. So you can just go to your terminal prompt and start messing around and create tables and whatnot. That's usually a reasonable way to create your tables and administer them and alter them and whatnot. There's also a Phoenix API for Java that you can link into your Java programs and code directly against. There's also a JDBC driver that we talked about before, and you can think of that as a thick client where a lot of the logic for talking to Phoenix actually exists on the client side, which isn't always what you want, but it does make for a very simple interface to applications or clients that already talk to JDBC, and that's kind of the whole point here. They also offer something called the Phoenix Query Server that allows you to split out the heavyweight parts of the JDBC driver into its own server, so that allows you to scale that piece out independently if you want to. So you could potentially have a separate fleet of Phoenix query servers that is doing all the hard work of the Phoenix client, and then have a thinner client on your actual application that talks to that fleet of query servers. So in some architectures, that can be useful. Its ultimate goal, however, is to enable a way for non-Java-based applications to talk to Phoenix directly. Okay, so in the future, it's not there yet, the thin client for the Phoenix query server may support non-Java languages. And finally, it provides jars as part of the distribution for MapReduce, Hive, Pig, Flume, and Spark. So all you have to do is include those in your MapReduce, Hive, Pig, Flume, or Spark programs, and that will allow you to very, very easily communicate with Phoenix from these other systems that might be residing on your cluster. So cool stuff. So let's mess around with it. Enough talk. Let's go and install Phoenix on our Hortonworks Sandbox instance. We'll do some playing around with the command line interface and set up a table for the user's movie lens data like we've done before. And we haven't given Pig much love lately, so let's actually do our example for Phoenix using Pig. This time what we'll do is we'll store the movie lens user data into HBase via Phoenix using Pig, and then we're going to load it back and do some queries on it through Pig. So let's see how that works. But first, one more cool Phoenix picture. I just love these things. All right, moving on.